Well, the common thread is that all of these stories featured something that was seeming to be what it could not be until it actually had the essential element involved. Now, that's a lot, right? So what does that mean? In the course's description, a human baby without that first breath is a bag of flesh. In the most unrefined description, an Audi A8, fresh off the lot with no gas in it, is just an expensive room. Very small, very inconvenient, kind of comfortable. But it's a room. Okay? That new phone, without a charged battery, is dumber than a brick. I mean, at least you can build something with a brick. What are you going to do with a phone this big? Nothing. Okay? And Justin, or anybody else, before the gospel, is not living.
That's it.
And matter of fact, you will not be living, and you definitely will not be a Christian without the gospel. Okay? So, where am I?
That's it. Teach and preach.
So what I'm praying that we understand today is that the gospel for the Christian is like air for the newborn baby. It's like gasoline for a car. It's like a battery for a phone. Your life simply does not begin until you get it.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
And I believe that a careful look at Ephesians 2 and Romans 1 and 16 will help you to see that. Okay? So you can jot those down, take a look at them later. But those scriptures will help you to see definitively that your life does not exist until the gospel. But that's not where the analogy actually stops. It goes a little bit further, because without air or breath, if that baby stops breathing, it won't live any longer.
Yes, sir.
If you drive the Audi A8 until it's completely on E and you never refuel it, it goes back to being an expensive, very small, kind of comfortable room. If the battery for the phone is lost, it goes back to being worth less than a brick. And if I or anybody else tries to live one day without the gospel, he, at that moment, is in danger of being no more a Christian than the atheist who says that there is no God. Now, I know that this is bold, but this is the truth. Without the gospel, not only can we not be born again, we cannot be maintained. So you say, what do you mean, Justin? The gospel, this is basic stuff. I know this already. And I say, no. I think the scriptures say, no ma'am, no sir. You don't move on from the gospel. The gospel is not for beginners. The gospel is designed to take us from new birth to sanctification to glorification in heaven. Okay, it's designed to take us through every phase of your spiritual life. That is what the gospel is. You say the gospel is simple. It's John 3:16, Justin. How am I supposed to use this in my everyday life? And I say, that's the right question. So to begin to answer that question, I want to give you this little, I guess you'll call it a logical equation. Okay? So 1, the gospel is God's solution to sin. You might want to write this down. If not, just try to remember, 1, the gospel is God's solution to sin. 2, there are no problems, conflicts, bad attitudes, and poor attitudes and bad situations that do not result in some way or form from sin.
Yes, sir.
Therefore, the gospel is the answer to all problems, conflicts, bad situations, and poor attitudes. Okay? I'll say it again. Number 1, the gospel is God's solution to sin. Number 2, there are no problems, conflicts, poor attitudes, or bad situations that do not result in some way, shape, or form from sin. Number 3, therefore, the gospel is the solution to all problems, conflicts, bad situations, and poor attitudes. Okay? So now, I think this explains why we will always need the gospel. Because as long as there is sin to deal with, we will need the gospel to show us how. I've been throwing this term, the gospel, around a lot, and now I like to really deal with it from the perspective of the text, John chapter 3. So how I think this is going to go is I'm going to paint some very broad strokes to deal with the first 8 verses, because I don't want to spend a lot of time there, because I don't want to keep everybody all day. So I'm painting some very broad strokes to deal with the first 8 verses. Verses 9 through 13, we'll use a little bit finer brush so that we can cover each verse by verse, but still not take a lot of time on it. And the core of what we really want to talk about is between verses 14 and 16. And that's where we're really going to try to go into detail so that we can drive this home. Usually, preachers, we want to bring out 3 points. But as I study the text, I think that there's only 2 questions that we need to answer. What is the gospel? And how do I use it every day? Just like anything else you buy, what is an iPhone and how do I use it? What is a car and how do I use it? What is a waffle maker and how do I use it? They're the only questions that we need to know from this text in this, when we're looking at it from this angle, okay? So, and we'll get to those answers towards the end. So we're going to do, like I said, that earlier summary is kind of just like background. Verses 1 through 3. Now there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. This man came to Jesus by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher come from God, for no one can do these signs that you do unless God is with him. Jesus answered him, Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see God. Unless one is born again, he cannot see God. A very important, very religious, though not yet saved or Christian man named Nicodemus comes to meet Jesus in the nighttime because apparently there's something on his mind that he needs to talk about. The text does not tell us what Nicodemus personally wanted to ask Jesus. But because Jesus never lets Nicodemus ask a question, we can assume that what Jesus told Nicodemus was exactly what he needed to know. Okay? So, Jesus says to him, unless he is born again, he cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. So, I guess he wanted to know how to get to heaven. Verses 4 through 8. Nicodemus said to him, How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born? Jesus answered, Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. Do not marvel that I said to you, you must be born again. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear its sound, but you do not know where it comes from or where it goes. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit. All right, so Nicodemus is astounded by Jesus' answer to the question he did not ask. Okay? He asks, how can a man be born again? And I think the impossibility and the radicalness of Jesus' answer is what invokes such a strange response from Nicodemus. Can a man go back into his mother's womb? Obviously, he knows he can't. But Jesus said it was something so impossible that I guess the only thing Nicodemus could think of was a crazy answer, a crazy response, Almost sarcastic. We might say that he was being sarcastic. But Jesus, being Jesus, continues on saying, you must be born of the Spirit of God and cleansed by the Word. In this section, water refers to the cleansing and washing of the soul by the Word. Purification, similar to the washing with water that is described in Ephesians 6 between Christ and the church. I wish we had time to dig into it, but we don't. So I'm encouraging everyone to check that out for yourself, including me, because I want to understand more fully. But yes, Jesus says you must be born of the water and the Spirit to enter God's kingdom, because flesh won't enter the spiritual kingdom. At this point, I see Nicodemus being quite confused because Jesus says to him, don't be confused. Okay? He says, don't be confused because I said be born again. And you don't see how that is possible. You know that the wind blows back and forth. You don't know where it's coming from. And you don't know where it's going. But you accept it. It's the same way with people who are born of the Spirit. You don't understand it all. You don't grasp it all. But you should accept and believe that it happens. Verse 9. Nicodemus said to him, how can these things be? Obviously, Nicodemus still does not understand, and he makes it clear. This still seems like an impossible situation to him, and it's unacceptable in his mind. Verse 10. Jesus answered him, are you the teacher of Israel, and yet you do not understand these things? Now, when you look at this, I don't think it's that Jesus is astounded by